She was already late when the call came through, the dispatcher's voice breaking with static as if the land itself resisted being reached. The coordinates pointed to a forgotten settlement beyond the last paved road, where even the maps seemed unsure. The patient was critical, barely breathing, and no other medical unit could get there in time. She threw her bag onto the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove. The road quickly narrowed, asphalt giving way to gravel, gravel to mud. Tall, dark trees pressed in from both sides, their branches knitting together above her like a tunnel. Her phone lost signal completely. Only the headlights cut through the dusk, illuminating drifting fog that clung low to the ground. She kept glancing at the clock, calculating minutes, imagining a stranger somewhere ahead whose life depended on her speed. That was when she saw movement near the river. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow thrown by the swaying trees. But then she caught the sound. Splashing, frantic, uneven. She slammed on the brakes just before the old wooden bridge and jumped out, her boots sinking into wet soil. Down the embankment, in the black water, a woman was fighting the current. The river was swollen from recent rains, cold and fast, pulling her under again and again. There was no time to think. She shrugged off her jacket, slid down the muddy slope, and plunged into the water. The cold stole her breath, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She grabbed the woman by the arm just as her head disappeared beneath the surface and dragged her toward the bank. It took everything she had to haul her out, both of them collapsing onto the grass, gasping. The woman lay still. Long dark hair clung to her face, and her clothes were strange, layers of fabric, beads, small metal charms that clicked softly as she moved. The rescuer checked for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady. Relief washed over her. As she reached for her medical bag, the woman's fingers suddenly closed around her wrist. The touch was ice cold. A sharp jolt ran through her arm, straight into her chest, as if something had snapped into place. The forest seemed to tilt. For a split second, the sounds of night, the river, the insects, the wind, fell away, replaced by silence. Then images flooded her mind. A car twisted around a tree, metal smoking. A house burning, flames licking at the sky. A child's face, tear-streaked, staring straight at her. None of it made sense. None of it belonged to her. She staggered back, heart racing. The woman's eyes were open now, unnervingly clear despite her ordeal. They were an odd color, shifting between gray and green, and they studied her with unsettling calm. "You felt it," the woman said hoarsely. "What did you do?" she whispered, more frightened than angry. "Nothing that wasn't already waiting," the woman replied. "You saved me. Now you see." She tried to shake off the feeling, to focus on logic, on training. Shock, hypothermia, adrenaline, there were explanations for strange sensations. She wrapped the woman in her jacket and helped her sit up. "I have to go," she said. "Someone is dying." The woman smiled faintly. "You will reach them. But the road will try to take you first." Before she could ask what that meant, the woman's grip loosened. She slumped back, eyes closing as if exhausted. Panic flared again, but her breathing was steady. Alive. There was no time to take her along. She dialed emergency services, hoping for a signal. Nothing. She marked the location as best she could, murmured a promise to come back, and ran to her car. As she drove, the forest felt different. Heavier. Every shadow seemed sharper, every sound louder. Then the visions returned. She saw it before it happened. The fallen tree. Blocking the road, the exact moment she would have swerved too late. Her foot moved on instinct, braking hard seconds before the headlights revealed the obstacle. The car skidded but stopped safely. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Further on, she slowed at a bend without knowing why. A deer leapt across the road where she would have hit it moments later. Each time, the sense of inevitability pressed in, as if the future whispered just before unfolding. By the time she reached the settlement, her nerves were raw. The house was barely standing, lights flickering. Inside, the patient lay pale and unconscious, family members hovering in fear. She went to work automatically, guided not just by training now, but by brief flashes, when the breathing would falter, when the heart would stutter. She adjusted her actions seconds before each crisis, staying ahead of disaster. The patient lived. Hours later, as dawn crept into the sky, she stepped outside, exhausted. Relief should have filled her, but unease lingered instead. She kept seeing the woman in the river, her strange calm, her words. On the drive back, she returned to the bridge. The river flowed as if nothing had happened. The grass was undisturbed. No jacket. No footprints. No sign of anyone ever being there. Her heart sank. Had she imagined it all? Then she noticed her wrist. A faint mark circled it, like a thin band of ash pressed into the skin. When she touched it, images stirred again, quiet this time, distant, waiting. She understood then that the woman hadn't been just someone she saved. She had been a threshold. And by crossing it, by choosing to stop instead of driving past, she had accepted something she could never give back. The road home stretched ahead, familiar yet changed. Somewhere between the trees and the rising sun, she realized the truth. From now on, every urgent call would carry more than a destination. It would carry echoes of what might be lost, and what might still be saved. She was already running behind schedule when the call finally broke through the crackling static. The dispatcher's voice sounded tense, strained, as if even the air between them resisted carrying the message. The location was deep in the countryside, far beyond the city limits, past the last reliable stretch of asphalt. A single patient, unconscious, unstable, no nearby medical units available. If she didn't get there, no one would. She didn't hesitate. Years in emergency work had trained her to move first and think later. She grabbed her medical bag, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The familiar hum of the car should have been comforting, but tonight it felt fragile against the vast dark ahead. The road thinned quickly. Streetlights disappeared. Phone signal dropped to nothing. Trees crowded close, tall and old, their branches knitting together overhead, turning the road into a tunnel of shadow. Fog crept in low, rolling across the ground like breath from the earth itself. Her headlights cut narrow paths through it, revealing potholes, broken signs, and the occasional rusted fence swallowed by vines. She kept her eyes flicking between the road and the clock. Every minute mattered. Somewhere ahead, a life was slipping away. Then she saw the river. It ran parallel to the road for a short stretch, swollen and dark from recent rain. As she approached the old wooden bridge, something moved near the water's edge. At first, she thought it was an animal. But then she heard it. A sharp, desperate splash, followed by a choking gasp. She slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly before stopping. Her pulse spiked. She grabbed a flashlight and jumped out, cold air biting through her uniform. The sound came again, unmistakable now. A human sound. Down the embankment, in the black water, a woman was struggling. The current pulled hard, dragging her under, releasing her just long enough for a breath before swallowing her again. The river was no place for hesitation. Without stopping to calculate risk, she dropped the flashlight, kicked off her boots, and slid down the muddy slope. The cold hit her like a physical blow as she plunged in, stealing her breath, numbing her limbs. She fought through the water, grabbed the woman's arm, and locked her grip. The woman was lighter than she expected but limp, barely helping. Inch by inch, she dragged her toward the bank, muscles screaming, lungs burning. Finally, with one last surge, she hauled them both onto the grass. They lay there, gasping, soaked, shivering. The woman didn't move. Her training snapped back into place. She rolled the woman onto her side, checked her airway, pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse. Weak, but present. Relief loosened something tight in her chest. She reached for her bag. That was when the woman's hand closed around her wrist. The skin was unnaturally cold, colder than the river should have made it. The contact sent a shock straight through her, sharp and electric. Her vision blurred. The forest tilted. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Then it broke open. Images poured into her mind with brutal clarity. A car wrapped around a tree, steam rising from crushed metal. A house engulfed in flames, windows exploding outward. A narrow hospital corridor streaked with blood. Faces flashed by. Fear, grief, desperation. A child crying her name, though she had never seen the child before. She cried out and stumbled back, ripping her hand free. Her heart hammered so hard it hurt. The woman was sitting up now, as if she hadn't nearly drowned. Wet hair clung to her face, but her eyes were open and focused, sharp in a way that made her skin prickle. Around her neck hung strings of beads, small bones, bits of metal etched with symbols she didn't recognize. You felt it, the woman said quietly. What did you do to me? She demanded, forcing her voice steady. The woman smiled faintly, not unkindly. Nothing that wasn't already possible. You just opened the door. She shook her head. You're in shock. You need medical attention. So do you, the woman replied. Just not the kind you know. She wrapped her jacket around the woman's shoulders, hands shaking despite herself. I have to go. Someone is dying. Yes, the woman said. You're late already. That stopped her. How do you know that? The woman's gaze drifted to the road. Because if you leave now, you'll reach them alive. If you leave 3 minutes later, you won't. Anger flared, sharp and defensive. That's not funny. I'm not joking, the woman said. And neither is the road ahead. She took a step back, heart racing. Logic fought to reassert itself. Hallucinations caused by adrenaline, stress, cold exposure. That had to be it. I'm calling for help, she said. There's no signal, the woman replied calmly. Not here. She hesitated, then tried anyway. No bars. Nothing. The woman closed her eyes, suddenly looking exhausted. Go, she said. I'll be where I need to be. Something about her certainty unsettled her more than fear would have. She left the woman wrapped in the jacket, marked the spot in her mind, and ran back to the car. The engine roared to life. She pulled onto the road, hands tight on the wheel. Less than a kilometer later, dread crawled up her spine for no clear reason. Her foot lifted from the accelerator just as headlights caught a fallen tree sprawled across the road. If she'd been going full speed, she would have hit it head on. Her chest tightened. She drove around it slowly, breath shallow. Minutes later, she felt it again, an invisible warning. She slowed. At a blind curve, a truck burst around the bend, skidding on wet gravel. It passed inches from her bumper. Her hands were shaking now. The images returned in fragments, no longer overwhelming but precise. A flicker of the speedometer. The moment to brake. The second to turn the wheel. Each time she listened, disaster slid past her instead of into her. By the time she reached the settlement, she was trembling with exhaustion and disbelief. The house was old, leaning, lit by a single flickering bulb. Inside, the air was thick with fear. The patient lay on a narrow bed, skin gray, breathing shallow. Family members hovered helplessly. She went to work. But something was different now. She knew when the patient's airway would fail before it did. She knew when the heart would stumble. She moved seconds ahead of each crisis, adjusting, correcting, guiding the body back from the edge. It felt less like medicine and more like following a script she'd already read. The patient stabilized. When it was over, she stepped outside into the early dawn, legs weak. The sky was pale, washed clean by night. She should have felt triumph. Instead, a quiet dread settled in her chest. On the drive back, she returned to the bridge. The river flowed calmly. The grass was undisturbed. No jacket. No footprints. No sign of anyone ever being there. Cold spread through her. Her wrist tingled. She looked down. A faint, circular mark ringed it, like a thin band of shadow pressed into her skin. When she touched it, images stirred, soft, distant, waiting. She understood then that the woman hadn't simply been saved. She had been a gate. And by stopping, by choosing compassion over urgency, she had crossed it. The road ahead stretched long and quiet. She drove on, knowing that every call from now on would carry more than just a destination. It would carry the weight of futures whispering just out of sight, and the terrible responsibility of seeing them. She was already tense before the call even finished connecting. The dispatcher's voice crackled through layers of static, breaking apart as if the land itself resisted being named. The coordinates came slowly, repeated twice, then a third time for certainty. A remote settlement, far beyond the city's reach, past the last reliable stretch of road. One patient. Critical condition. No other units available. If she didn't go, no one would. She shut the door to the ambulance bay with more force than necessary, tossed her medical bag onto the passenger seat, and slid behind the wheel. The engine started on the first try, a small mercy. She pulled out into the night, lights cutting a thin path through the darkness. At first, the drive was familiar. Asphalt, road signs, occasional houses glowing faintly behind curtains. Then the streetlights thinned, spaced farther apart, until they disappeared altogether. Pavement gave way to cracked concrete, then gravel. Her phone lost signal entirely. The world narrowed to the road ahead, the hum of the engine, and the ticking clock on the dashboard. Tall trees crowded close, ancient and silent, their branches arching overhead like ribs. Fog crept in low and slow, sliding across the ground, coiling around her tires. She rolled the window down slightly to keep herself alert. Cold air rushed in, sharp and damp, carrying the smell of wet earth and leaves. She checked the clock again. She was cutting it close. Then she saw movement near the river. It was just a flicker at first, a disturbance in the fog where the road curved toward an old wooden bridge. She might have driven past it if not for the sound, water breaking violently, followed by a hoarse, panicked gasp. She slammed the brakes. The car skidded, gravel crunching beneath the tires, before stopping just short of the bridge. Her heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed her flashlight and jumped out, boots splashing into a shallow puddle. The cold hit her instantly, biting through her uniform. Another splash. She ran to the edge of the embankment and shone the light downward. The beam caught the surface of the river, black and swollen from rain, churning faster than it looked. And there, just beyond the reach of the light, a woman surfaced briefly, arms flailing before the current dragged her under again. There was no time to weigh consequences. She dropped the flashlight, shrugged out of her jacket, and slid down the muddy slope. The river swallowed her legs, then her waist, then her chest. The cold was brutal, a shock that knocked the breath from her lungs. She forced herself forward, fighting the current, eyes locked on the spot where the woman had gone under. She caught her just as her head disappeared again, fingers closing around a thin wrist. The woman was limp, barely resisting. With everything she had, she dragged her toward the bank, slipping, choking, muscles burning. The world narrowed to effort and breath in the icy pull of the water. Finally, she managed to haul them both onto the grass. They lay there, gasping, soaked to the bone. Her heart pounded wildly as she rolled the woman onto her side and checked her airway. Clear. She pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. Relief surged through her. The woman didn't open her eyes. Long dark hair clung to her pale face. Her clothes were strange, layers of fabric that didn't belong to any modern fashion, heavy with water. Around her neck hung strings of beads, bits of metal, small charms etched with symbols. They clicked softly as the woman shivered. She reached for her medical bag. That was when the woman's hand snapped shut around her wrist. The skin was unnaturally cold, far colder than the river could explain. The moment their skin touched, a violent jolt tore through her body. Her vision blurred. The forest tilted. The sound of the river vanished as if someone had turned down the world itself. Then everything exploded. Images flooded her mind in rapid succession, sharp and merciless. A car twisted around a tree, metal screaming, steam rising from the hood. A house burning from the inside out, flames licking windows, smoke choking the sky. A narrow hospital corridor slick with blood. A child's face, streaked with tears, eyes wide with terror, looking straight at her and calling her name. She cried out and stumbled backward, ripping her hand free. Her heart slammed against her ribs, pain radiating into her chest. She tasted metal. When the world steadied, the woman was sitting up. She should have been weak, disoriented, barely conscious. Instead, she looked disturbingly alert. Her eyes, gray, green, something in between, fixed on her with unsettling focus. "You felt it," the woman said softly. "What did you do to me?" she demanded, forcing the words out past her racing pulse. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying her. "Nothing you weren't already capable of. I only helped you notice." "That's not possible," she snapped. "You nearly drowned." "Nearly," the woman agreed. "But not today." She wrapped her jacket around the woman's shoulders, hands shaking despite her efforts to control them. "You're in shock. Hypothermia. I need to get you help." The woman smiled faintly. "You don't have time for that. I always have time to save a life." The woman's gaze drifted toward the road. "Do you? The one waiting for you is slipping fast." Her breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because you're already late." A surge of anger flared, sharp and defensive. "Listen to me. I'm calling for assistance." "There's no signal here," the woman said calmly. She pulled out her phone anyway. No. Bars. Nothing. The woman closed her eyes briefly, as if exhausted. Go, she said. You've done enough for me. She hesitated. Everything in her training screamed against leaving someone like this alone. And yet something about the woman's certainty unsettled her deeply. I'll come back, she said, more to herself than to the woman. You will, the woman replied. But not the way you think. She ran back to the car, slammed the door, and pulled onto the road. Her hands were slick with cold and sweat as she gripped the steering wheel. Less than a minute later, dread crawled up her spine for no clear reason. Her foot lifted from the accelerator instinctively. Seconds later, her headlights caught a massive fallen tree sprawled across the road. If she hadn't slowed, she would have hit it head on. Her chest tightened. She drove around it carefully, breath shallow. The feeling came again farther on, a pressure behind her eyes, a whisper of certainty. She slowed at a blind curve just as a truck barreled around it, skidding on wet gravel. It passed inches from her bumper. Her hands began to shake. Images flickered at the edge of her vision now, brief and precise. The exact moment to brake. The second to turn the wheel. Each time she listened, disaster slid past her instead of into her. By the time she reached the settlement, she was exhausted, nerves frayed, mind reeling. The house was barely standing, old wood sagging under years of neglect. A single bulb flickered on the porch. Inside, the air was thick with fear. The patient lay unconscious on a narrow bed, skin ashen, breathing shallow and irregular. Family members hovered nearby, eyes pleading. She went to work. But it wasn't the same. She knew, somehow, when the patient's breathing would falter before it did. She adjusted the airway seconds early. She sensed the heart's hesitation and intervened before alarms would have sounded. Each movement felt guided, as if she were following instructions written just ahead of the present moment. The patient stabilized. Hours later, dawn crept pale and quiet across the sky. She stepped outside, legs weak, hands numb. Relief should have washed over her. Instead, a heavy awareness settled in her chest. On the drive back, she returned to the bridge. The river flowed calmly. The grass was undisturbed. No jacket. No footprints. No sign of anyone ever being there. Cold spread through her veins. Her wrist tingled. She looked down. A faint circular mark ringed it, like a thin band of shadow pressed into her skin. When she touched it, images stirred, soft now, distant, waiting. She understood then that the woman hadn't just been someone she saved. She had been a threshold. And by stopping, by choosing compassion over urgency, she had crossed it. The road stretched ahead, quiet and familiar, yet forever changed. She drove on, knowing that every call from now on would carry more than a destination. It would carry the weight of futures whispering just out of sight, and the terrible responsibility of seeing them.